The coffee was still warm in my hands, but the bitterness I tasted had nothing to do with the brew. I was sitting in my own kitchen, in the quiet of a Saturday morning, and all I could hear was the echo of my son's laughter from an hour ago. "Mom, you didn't hear me again, did you?" he'd said, and my daughter-in-law, Alicia, had laughed right along with him. It was the 5th time this month. 5 times I'd smiled weakly, pretending it was just a harmless joke. But sitting there, staring at the steam rising from my cup, I realized it wasn't harmless at all. With every joke, a little piece of my dignity was chipped away. They weren't just laughing about my hearing, they were laughing at me. At 67 years old, I had become the punchline in my own family. And in the quiet of that kitchen, I decided the laughter had to stop. Before we begin our story tonight, our journey into a moment that might feel familiar, take a slow breath. Settle into your chair, let the quiet of the room hold you, and allow the noise of the day to fade into gentle stillness. You're in a safe space here, a quiet world of story and strength. If you're joining from the United States, welcome. If you're watching from Europe, greetings to you. And to those from Asia, Africa, Australia, or anywhere the day is just beginning or the night has already deepened, I'm so glad you're here. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this story if you believe in the importance of respect and setting boundaries, no matter your age. It helps this cozy little corner of our community grow, and it lets me know you'd like more stories like this one. I'm Megan Kristen, 67, living in Scottsdale, Arizona. A quiet neighborhood, decent people, a nice place to call home. My life has mostly been good, raised my son, Terry, here, and now I get to spend time with my 2 grandkids. Life's simple, but lately, every time Terry and his wife Alicia visit, there's always something. They make jokes about my hearing. At first, I just brushed it off. I laughed along, told myself it was no big deal. But after a while, I started to feel something that I couldn't ignore. This morning was no different. Terry came by with Alicia and the kids, like they do every Saturday. They'd arrived for the usual weekend visit. And of course, the jokes began as soon as they walked through the door. "Mom, did you hear me?" Terry laughed, calling out from the kitchen as he grabbed a soda from the fridge. I didn't react right away, but I knew what was coming. Alicia, always quick to jump in, joined him. "Oh, Terry, come on. We all know Mom's hearing's a little, off." I smiled weakly, because that's what I was expected to do. But something about it today hit different. Terry grinned, as if it was just another playful exchange between us. But in my chest, something was twisting, and I didn't feel like laughing this time. It felt like a punch, though it was disguised as a joke. "Mom, you didn't hear me again, did you?" he said, half teasing, half serious. It wasn't funny anymore. I didn't say anything at first. I just went into the kitchen, poured myself more coffee, and pretended it didn't bother me. I wanted to tell them to stop. I wanted to say something, anything, to make them realize how hurtful it was. But I didn't. Instead, I kept the smile plastered on my face and tried to change the subject. "You're a little late today," I said, glancing at the clock on the wall. Alicia laughed again. You know how Terry is, always running behind. But she wasn't laughing with me. She was laughing at me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to laugh along. I walked to the window and stared out at the quiet street. The cars passing by seemed to be moving faster than everything in my life. The world outside felt like it was going on without me. And there I was, standing in my own home, trying to ignore the feeling that I was losing my dignity bit by bit. You see, it wasn't just a joke. It wasn't just about hearing anymore. This was about respect. I had spent my whole life teaching Terry about respect, about family values, about understanding the people who take care of you. And here he was a grown man, making light of my hearing like it was no big deal. It wasn't just the joke itself that bothered me. It was the fact that he didn't see how it was wearing me down. He didn't notice how each time they laughed, a little piece of me felt smaller. And Alicia, she didn't seem to care either. I had always tried to be the supportive mother, the one who said yes to everything. I raised him on my own after Jack passed away, and I gave everything to make sure Terry had what he needed. I helped him when he needed it, and I gave him a shoulder to lean on. I never complained, never asked for anything in return. And now, this is how I was being treated. The joke seemed innocent enough to them, but to me, it was like a reminder that I was slipping, that my age was becoming the punchline. Every time they joked about my hearing, it felt like I was losing more of myself. And the worst part, they didn't even know it. I wasn't going to let this go on anymore. I was tired of being the one who smiled through it, the one who just accepted it because it was easier than confronting them. I had raised him to respect me, and now it was time to make sure he understood that respect wasn't something to take for granted. But I wasn't sure how to do it. Part of me wanted to just keep quiet, to let it slide again. After all, they were busy with their lives. Alicia worked full-time, and Terry had his own family. But then I thought about how much I had given to them, how much I had put up with. And that's when it hit me. I couldn't let this keep happening. It was time to speak up, time to tell them how I felt. I couldn't live with myself anymore, pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. Not when my own son was making jokes about something as serious as my hearing. And as I stood by the window, staring out at the world that seemed to keep moving forward, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them treat me like I was senile. I wasn't going to let them continue laughing at me and pretending it didn't matter. But I wasn't sure how to start. What would I say? How would I make them understand that this wasn't just about hearing, it was about respect, dignity, and the way I deserved to be treated in my own home? The tension in my chest grew. I knew I had to do something, but the question was, could I? It happened again. That same joke. I'd heard it so many times now that it had started to feel like a broken record. But this time it was different. This time, something inside me snapped. I was sitting in the living room, reading my book while the kids were busy in the backyard. Terry and Alicia had just come in from the garage. I heard the familiar sound of the doorbell chime through the house, a sound that I'd grown so used to over the years. But this time, Terry couldn't resist. "Mom, did you hear that?" He said it loud enough that even Alicia, who was hanging up her coat, could hear. I looked up from my book, and before I could even respond, he went on. "You're going to need that hearing aid checked again. I bet you didn't hear the doorbell. Did you?" Alicia laughed along with him, nodding her head. "Maybe we should start calling before we show up, just to be sure." They both laughed. I forced a smile, trying not to let it sting. But it did. It stung more than I cared to admit. "You know, I'm still here," I said, trying to keep the tone light. "Just because I didn't hear the doorbell doesn't mean I'm losing my mind. Terry." But deep down, I knew they didn't take me seriously. It was just another joke to them. I didn't say anything after that. I sat there, trying to focus on my book again, but the words blurred together. My mind kept replaying the scene in my head. How often had they made these kinds of jokes? How often had I let it slide? How many times had I smiled along, pretending it didn't hurt, just to keep the peace? It had been months now, maybe even longer. Every time they came by, Terry would make some comment, some joke about my hearing. Sometimes it was about me not hearing the doorbell. Other times it was about missing something on TV or not understanding a conversation. And Alicia, well, she always joined in, laughing like it was nothing. I couldn't help but wonder, when did this become okay? When did I start accepting it? I had always raised Terry with the belief that respect was everything, especially for family. And yet, here I was, a woman in her late 60s, sitting quietly while my son mocked me. The very son I had given everything for, the son I had spent sleepless nights worrying over, and the son who had once looked to me for guidance. Now, I felt like a joke, a punchline in my own home. I thought back to when I was younger, when I could do anything, when I had a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of humor. I didn't need anyone to explain things to me or repeat themselves. But now, as the years had gone by, it was harder to keep up with everything. My hearing wasn't what it used to be, and I had accepted that. I had learned to work around it, but what I couldn't accept was being made to feel lesser because of it. It wasn't just the joke itself anymore. It was the way they both treated it like it was no big deal. The way they laughed at my expense without ever thinking twice. I wanted to tell them how much it hurt, but every time I opened my mouth, I felt like the words got stuck. Was I really going to let them think it was okay to laugh at me? I had tried to ignore it for so long, hoping it would stop, but it never did. It just kept happening, and every time it happened, a little piece of me chipped away. Was I being too sensitive? Was I overreacting? I asked myself those questions 1,000 times. But the truth was, I wasn't overreacting. I was tired. Tired of pretending it didn't bother me, tired of letting them think they could get away with it. This was becoming a pattern, and I realized it wasn't just about hearing anymore. It was about something bigger. They were treating me like I didn't matter. They were ignoring my boundaries, my dignity, and my worth. And the worst part was, because I never spoke up, they didn't even know it. I was still trying to figure out how to handle it. But the longer I let this go on, the more I felt like I was losing myself. I couldn't keep letting them walk all over me like this. I had to do something. But what? Was I being unreasonable? Should I have said something sooner? I couldn't stop thinking about how this had become so normal in our family. Terry, who used to be so thoughtful, now couldn't see how his words were hurting me. Alicia, who I'd always gotten along with, was now laughing along with him. And I just sat there, smiling through the hurt, telling myself that it was easier to just let it slide. But as the days passed, I started to realize that letting it slide was doing more damage than speaking up ever would. I spent the rest of that day thinking about it, weighing my options. I thought about my role as a mother, as a grandmother. Had I allowed this to happen? Had I been too quiet for too long, thinking that if I just ignored it, it would go away? But it didn't go away, and it wasn't going to unless I did something about it. I had always taught Terry to stand up for what was right, to respect people, especially family. Well, it was time for me to practice what I had preached all these years. I didn't want to cause trouble, but I was tired. Tired of being the joke. Tired of feeling small. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this go on any longer. As I sat on the couch that evening, the same empty feeling gnawed at me again. Terry and Alicia had just left, and the house was quiet, too quiet. I sipped my tea, letting the warmth settle in my chest, but the peace didn't last long. My mind kept wandering back to the same thoughts that had been haunting me all day, the way Terry had acted today, and the jokes about my hearing. I started thinking about how I raised him, how I did everything I could to give him the best life possible. We didn't have much after Jack passed, but I made sure Terry never went without. I worked long hours, made sacrifices, and always put him first. I wanted him to grow up with values of respect, responsibility, and kindness. Those were the things I taught him day in and day out. But now, looking at him, I wondered if it had all been for nothing. I thought about Jack, my late husband, the way he always treated me, always with kindness and respect. He'd never have dreamed of mocking me for something like my hearing. When we were younger, I remember how we'd laugh together about life's little moments, but it was never at each other's expense. He'd tease me, sure, but it was always lighthearted, never cruel. Jack understood the importance of making the other person feel valued, not diminished. I could count on him to be my partner in every sense of the word. But things were different now. Terry wasn't like Jack. Over the years, it felt like something had shifted. The jokes about my hearing were just the tip of the iceberg. They were a symptom of a bigger issue, one that had been building up over time. I couldn't help but notice how much Terry had changed since he'd married Alicia. He wasn't the thoughtful, respectful son I raised. He was distracted, always busy with work and his own life. And now it seemed like respect had taken a back seat to everything else. Alicia, too. She had been nothing but kind when we first met, but lately she'd joined in on the jokes, and I couldn't figure out if she really found them funny, or if she was just going along with Terry. Either way, it didn't make me feel any better. She didn't seem to care that the jokes were wearing me down, and every time she laughed, it felt like she was telling me that it was okay, that it was normal to treat someone's dignity like a punchline. The worst part was, I didn't even know when it started. When did I let my son, my own flesh and blood, start treating me like this? When did I stop speaking up for myself? I had let him push boundaries with me for so long, always excusing it because I didn't want to rock the boat. But now, I was realizing that by staying quiet, I had allowed these little jokes, these little moments of disrespect to build into something bigger. I had let the boundaries slip without even realizing it. As I sat there, I thought about all the times I'd let it slide. All the times I'd brushed it off as just Terry being Terry, or Alicia just joining in. The truth was, I had been so afraid of causing friction that I didn't want to speak up. I didn't want to make things awkward or upset my son. But now I understood that by not saying anything, I was hurting myself, and I was allowing them to hurt me, too. I kept thinking back to when Terry was a little boy. He used to look up to me for everything. When he was in trouble, it was me he came to. When he needed advice, it was me who helped him find his way. I'd taught him right from wrong, the importance of being kind to others, and how family was supposed to treat each other. I had spent my life showing him what respect meant, but now it felt like all that hard work had gone unnoticed. That thought stung. It felt like a slap in the face, but it was the truth. I had raised him to respect me, to respect others, to know when to draw a line. And now, here I was wondering if I had failed somehow. Had I allowed him to cross lines with me because I didn't set enough boundaries? Was I too busy playing the role of good mom that I forgot to be Megan, the woman who deserved respect too? I kept running through the past, asking myself where I went wrong. Maybe it was when I started giving up things for him, when I stopped saying no, when I prioritized his needs over mine for too long. Maybe I became so focused on being the good mother that I forgot to be the person I was before I became a mom. I wasn't just Terry's mother. I was Megan, a woman who had her own worth, her own needs, and her own right to be treated with respect. The realization hit me hard. If I didn't speak up now, it was only going to get worse. The jokes weren't going to stop. The disrespect wasn't going to end unless I made it clear that it wasn't okay. I had been avoiding the confrontation, thinking it would resolve itself, but I knew now that I was the only one who could make that change. So many times I had held my tongue, thinking that if I let it go, everything would be fine. But I wasn't fine. My self-respect was slipping away, and I couldn't let that happen anymore. I had to set boundaries, not just for me, but for Terry and Alicia, too. They needed to understand that this wasn't acceptable, and it wasn't going to fly in my house anymore. They had to know that I wasn't going to stand by and let them diminish me, not out of anger, but out of love for myself and for them. As I sat there, the decision became clear. I couldn't keep allowing this to go on. It was time to take a stand. And that stand wasn't just for me. It was for all the women out there who have been quietly accepting disrespect because they didn't want to upset anyone. It was time to say enough. The thing about boundaries is they don't just protect us, they teach others how to treat us. And if I didn't start teaching Terry and Alicia that my time, my dignity, and my worth were non-negotiable, I couldn't expect them to change. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet, or what I was going to say, but I knew it had to be done. I was tired of being treated like I didn't matter. I was tired of laughing it off and pretending it didn't hurt. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of strength deep within me. It wasn't too late to stand up. And I was going to start right now. It all came to a head that Saturday afternoon. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I had been walking on eggshells for months, trying to keep the peace, trying to be the good mom and good grandmother. But after yet another joke about my hearing, something inside me snapped. I had invited Terry and Alicia over for lunch, as I usually did on the weekends. The kids were in the backyard, and Terry and Alicia were sitting across from me at the table, enjoying the meal I'd prepared. Everything seemed normal, too normal, until it happened. A simple comment. "Mom, you didn't hear that, did you?" Terry asked, a grin on his face. "I swear, we might need to get you a louder doorbell." It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. I'd heard it countless times before. But this time, it felt different. This time, I wasn't going to pretend it didn't bother me. This time, I was done. I put my fork down and looked him in the eye. Alicia looked at me, her smile fading, sensing the shift in the room. "Terry," I said, my voice steady but firm, "that joke isn't funny anymore. It's hurtful. And it's not okay." Terry blinked, then let out a soft chuckle, clearly surprised by my response. "Come on, Mom. We're just messing with you." But I wasn't laughing. "No," I said, feeling my heart beat a little faster. "You're not just messing with me. You're making me feel like I don't matter. You're treating me like I'm invisible, like my hearing issue is some sort of joke." The silence in the room was heavy. Alicia shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. Terry opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He clearly wasn't expecting this. I took a deep breath, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "I'm done with the jokes, Terry, and I'm done letting you think that I'm okay with it. I'm not." Alicia opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "And I'm not just going to sit here and keep pretending everything's fine either. I've been quiet for too long. I've let this go on for months, and it's not right. It's hurting me." I paused, the weight of what I was about to say sinking in. This wasn't easy. This was big. I'd been helping with the kids' college fund. I said, watching Terry's face change, "But that's stopping now. We can discuss resuming it when you can prove that you've heard me, when you show me that you respect me, not just as your mother, but as a person." The room fell completely still. Terry's face flushed a deep red. He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. Alicia's eyes widened, and she looked between the two of us, clearly caught off guard. "You're not serious," Terry finally said, his voice a little shaky. "Mom, that's a big move. You're talking about the kids' future here." "I know what I'm talking about," I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. "I've helped you and Alicia for a long time, but I'm not going to keep supporting something that treats me like a joke. You can't keep making light of my hearing or my worth." Terry looked down at his plate, his fingers drumming on the edge. Alicia remained silent, staring at the table, clearly unsure how to react. I felt a sharp pang of guilt. Maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe I'd overreacted. The guilt washed over me, but I shook it off. I couldn't let the fear of their disappointment hold me back anymore. This wasn't just about money. This was about my dignity, about my right to be treated with respect. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Terry looked up, his expression softened, but there was still a defensive edge to his voice. Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you, but we're just joking around. Alicia nodded, her eyes now avoiding mine. We didn't think it was a big deal, she added softly. I'm sorry if we made you feel bad. We didn't mean it. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if I believed it. I wasn't sure if this was just a way to smooth things over and get back to normal. It didn't feel like enough, not after everything that had been said. I know you didn't mean it, I said, my voice a little softer now. But intent doesn't always match impact. You've been making these jokes for so long, and it's not just about hearing. It's about respect. It's about how you see me, how you treat me. I'm still here, Terry. I'm still your mother. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, it felt like the weight of everything, years of quiet sacrifice, years of giving without asking for anything in return, had settled between us. Terry looked at Alicia, his face still flushed, and then he sighed. I get it, Mom. I'm sorry. You're right. We should have been more mindful. But even as he apologized, I wasn't sure if it was enough. It didn't feel like enough. Not yet. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky, but there was a sense of resolve in me now. I hope you understand why I'm doing this, Terry. It's not just about the money. It's about showing me that you respect me, that you hear me, because right now it feels like you don't. There was no more laughter, no more joking, just silence. Terry nodded slowly, his eyes finally meeting mine. We'll talk more about this, okay? I didn't say anything. I just walked to the window, looking out at the street, my mind racing with all the emotions that had built up. I didn't know if Terry truly understood yet. I didn't know if Alicia did either. But I had said my piece. As they left, I felt a sense of relief and a bit of guilt. Relief because I had finally spoken up, finally set a boundary. But guilt because I feared that in doing so, I might have torn something apart that couldn't be fixed. It wasn't easy, but I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep letting this slide. And as much as I loved them, I needed to teach them that I was still Megan, still a person, still deserving of respect. And if that meant stopping the college fund for a while, so be it. They needed to understand that boundaries weren't negotiable, not in my life. The next morning, the phone rang just as I was finishing my breakfast. I glanced at the screen, and there it was, Terry's name. My stomach tightened, a mix of dread and hope running through me. He hadn't called in the aftermath of our conversation yesterday, not directly anyway. But now, here it was, and I couldn't ignore it. I picked up the phone, my hand shaking slightly. Hello, Mom, it's Terry. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. I leaned back in my chair, still trying to process everything that had happened the day before. I figured you'd call, I said, keeping my voice steady. I didn't want him to hear the uncertainty in it. I'm sorry, Mom. Terry started, clearly trying to find the right words. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know I've been making those jokes about your hearing, but I didn't think it was a big deal. I never realized how much it was bothering you. I really didn't. I could tell he was sincere, but something in his voice didn't quite sit right with me. It sounded like he was trying to fix things too quickly, as though he didn't fully understand why I was upset, just that he was supposed to be sorry. I appreciate the apology, Terry, I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. But you've been making those jokes for months now, and it's not just about hearing. It's about respect. It's about how you see me and how I deserve to be treated. I get it, Mom, really. I do, he replied, his voice quieter now. But I never meant for it to hurt you. You're my mom. I love you. I guess I just got used to making light of things. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to say. Was this genuine? Or was it just a reflexive apology because he knew he had messed up? Just give me some time, Terry added, sounding like he was trying to make things right, but I wasn't convinced. I sighed and leaned against the kitchen counter. Terry, I'm not asking for time. I'm asking for you to really hear me. This isn't just about a few jokes. It's about how I'm treated. I'm not some old woman who doesn't matter. You don't get to laugh at me like that anymore. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to treat you like that, he said, and I could hear the sincerity, but I wasn't sure it was enough. We ended the call with some awkward pleasantries, but something felt off. I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. There was still an emptiness in my chest, a feeling of something unresolved. Not long after, I got a text from Alicia. She apologized too, but it felt rushed, like she was doing it just to smooth things over. I'm sorry, Megan. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. It's just that we joke around a lot. I hope you understand. We love you. I stared at the message, my fingers gripping the phone tightly. I didn't feel any warmth from her words. It felt more like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear, not what she really felt. In some ways, it hurt even more than Terry's apology. At least with him, I could hear the struggle in his voice. But Alicia, she wasn't even trying to make it feel real. I put the phone down and stared out the window, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, but it didn't seem to make the room feel any brighter. I had made a bold move the day before, standing up for myself, for my dignity. But now, as the aftermath settled in, I wasn't sure if I had done the right thing. Was I too harsh? Should I have just let it go, kept pretending that everything was fine? I couldn't shake the guilt. I had stopped helping with the kids' college fund, something I had always taken pride in doing for my grandchildren. I hadn't done it out of spite. I hadn't even wanted to punish them. But now, I wondered if it was too much. Would they see it as me being unreasonable? Was I just too old-fashioned in my thinking? But then I reminded myself that this wasn't just about the money. It was about respect. I had spent so many years giving my time, my love, my support, and all I had asked for in return was the same respect I had always shown them. If I didn't stand up for myself now, when would I? Still, the weight of it sat heavy on me. I didn't want to break the bond one had with my son and his family. I didn't want to be the source of tension, but I couldn't be silent anymore. As I sat there, the guilt slowly started to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. I knew I had done what I had to do. I had set a boundary, something I had been avoiding for too long. And whether they understood it now or not, I had to stick with it. But that didn't make the aftermath any easier. I wasn't sure if Terry and Alicia were truly going to change. They had apologized, yes, but how long would it last? Would they slip back into the same old habits? Would they remember this conversation when they joked again, or would I have to remind them? I wondered if this would create a permanent rift in our family. Maybe this confrontation would be the one thing that changed everything for the better, or maybe it would only drive a wedge between us. But as much as I wanted everything to be okay again, I realized that I couldn't live with the idea that I was losing myself in the process. I couldn't keep letting them treat me like a joke, hoping they'd eventually understand. I had to stand my ground. I grabbed my purse and stepped outside onto the porch, taking in the cool morning air. The neighborhood was peaceful, the kind of quiet that always made me feel like everything was going to be okay. But today, that peace felt like it was just out of reach. I thought about what came next. How would Terry and Alicia respond in the days to come? Would they show real change, or was this just a temporary fix? For now, I had done what I could. The rest was up to them. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going to back down this time. And maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward healing. Not just for me, but for our whole family. A few days after that tense conversation, I found myself sitting in the living room, trying to keep my mind busy with anything other than what had happened. I'd made my stand, but that didn't mean the consequences were over. The silence between me and Terry lingered. Sure, he'd called to apologize, but the weight of it all still hung in the air, and I wasn't sure where we stood now. Then my phone buzzed again. It was Terry. He had called a few times since we last spoke, but I hadn't picked up. I wasn't ready yet, but today I felt a bit more settled, so I answered. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I just want to apologize again. I didn't realize how much my jokes were affecting you. Honestly, I feel awful about it now." I didn't know what to say right away. I had heard the apology before, but something about the tone in his voice made it feel different this time. It wasn't just the usual sorry because it was expected. It was like he really got it. "Terry," I started, "I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but you have to understand, it's not just about the jokes. It's about how you and Alicia treat me. I've let this slide for too long, but it doesn't change the fact that I deserve respect." "I understand now, Mom. I really do," he said, his voice softening. "I never thought about how it might make you feel. It's just you're always so strong, and I guess I got used to thinking you were fine with everything. But I see now that I was wrong." I let out a breath, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't expecting a miracle or an instant fix, but hearing that from him was a start, a real one. "You know, Terry, I've spent a long time trying to make sure you and Alicia have what you need. I've given so much of my time, my love, and sometimes I've lost sight of myself in the process. I had to speak up because if I didn't, I was going to lose me." He paused for a moment. "I get it, and I'm sorry for not realizing it sooner. I promise I'll do better. You deserve better." That was it. The conversation wasn't perfect, but it felt like we were finally starting to understand each other again. I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and I believed him. But as I hung up, a familiar feeling washed over me. Relief, yes, but also uncertainty. Was this going to last? Was Terry really going to change his behavior? Or was this just another apology to smooth things over? I had been in this position before, and I didn't want to set myself up for disappointment again. I spent the next few days thinking about it. The reality of setting boundaries was slowly sinking in. Standing up for myself wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't about making one big statement and hoping everything would fall into place. No, standing up for myself was about continuing to assert my needs. I had to keep showing up, even when it felt uncomfortable, even when it felt like maybe they were just saying what they thought I wanted to hear. Setting boundaries was like learning to walk again after a long time of standing still. At first, it felt wobbly, like I might fall, but little by little, I was getting used to it. And then something shifted. In the weeks that followed, I started noticing changes in how Terry and Alicia treated me. It wasn't huge, dramatic gestures, but the small things made all the difference. For one, the jokes about my hearing stopped. There was no more laughing when Terry repeated something for the third time, or Alicia nudging him, making comments like, "You know, she's not going to hear you, right?" They didn't treat me like I was fragile or some kind of joke anymore, and that felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. But it wasn't just the jokes. It was how they started showing more care in other ways too. When Terry came by one evening, he didn't just drop off the kids and leave. He sat down with me, asked how I was doing, and talked with me about things that weren't just about the kids or their schedules. For the first time in a long time, he treated me like a person, not just a caretaker. Alicia also started making an effort. She apologized again. This time, it felt more genuine. And we talked about everything that had happened. She didn't brush it off or make excuses. She acknowledged my feelings, and that meant something. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The most surprising part, they started involving me more in their lives, not just when they needed something. Terry called me for advice on things I hadn't been asked about in years. Alicia asked me to help with a family project she was working on. In some ways, I felt like I was being seen again, not just as mom or grandma who was expected to be there whenever they needed her, but as Megan, a person with her own life and her own worth. But there was still a part of me that wasn't sure. I didn't want to get my hopes up. I had been here before, making small changes, hoping for the best, only to have things slip back to the way they were. I couldn't help but feel conflicted. Was this change real? Was it sustainable? Could Terry and Alicia keep it up? Or would they fall back into old patterns? I could feel myself pulling back a little, hesitant to fully trust that things had really changed. But deep down, I wanted to believe that they had learned something, that they understood that respect, true respect, was more than just saying the right words. It was about action. Over the next few weeks, things between us felt less strained. We didn't have to walk on eggshells anymore. When Terry and Alicia came over, I no longer felt the sting of silence when they entered the room or the tension when Terry made his usual comments. They didn't need to apologize for every little thing anymore. Instead, we were building a new dynamic, one that didn't rely on me quietly accepting things just to keep the peace. I could see the changes, and that gave me hope. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't erase all the hurt from the past. But it was a start, a new chapter, and that was something worth holding on to. It wasn't an overnight change, but little by little, I began to notice the difference. After that conversation, Terry and Alicia started showing more thoughtfulness in their interactions with me. The jokes about my hearing stopped completely, and instead of making me the butt of their humor, they started including me in family conversations in a way that felt more genuine. They were no longer treating me like the old woman in the room. It was subtle at first, but it was there. One afternoon, Terry called to check in on me. He didn't ask for anything or make a joke. He just wanted to know how I was doing. He asked about my health, about what I had been up to, and how the house was holding up. It wasn't some rushed passing comment. It was a real conversation. "You doing okay, Mom?" he asked, sounding genuinely concerned. "I'm doing fine," I replied, surprised by how much his words meant. "Just taking it easy today. Catching up on my reading." He paused for a second before speaking again. "Good. I just wanted to say, again, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I think I've been missing the point for a while." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and it made a difference. It wasn't about the apology anymore. It was about the action that followed. He wasn't just saying the right things. He was actually thinking about what he had done. Alicia was quieter about it, but I noticed her efforts too. She started asking me for advice again. She'd text me to ask about cooking tips or what I thought about certain family decisions. She wasn't just going through the motions. She was showing interest, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. I wasn't just the person they leaned on for favors anymore. I was a part of the conversation in a real way, and that made me feel like I had a place in the family again. I could feel my confidence growing. It was small, but it was there. After all these years of putting everyone else's needs first, I was starting to see that I was worthy of respect, and not just from Terry and Alicia, but from everyone around me. I began setting boundaries outside of just my immediate family. I'd spent so much of my life avoiding conflict, saying yes when I should have said no, but now I felt like I had the right to say no without feeling guilty, whether it was my neighbors asking for favors or old friends expecting me to drop everything for them. I started standing my ground. It felt strange at first, but also empowering. I wasn't afraid to speak up anymore. I had earned the right to protect my time and my peace. It wasn't always easy, though. There were moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing, especially with Terry. I loved him, and I didn't want to hurt him. But I also knew that if I didn't take a stand, nothing would ever change. I needed him to see that I wasn't going to tolerate being disrespected. I'll never forget the first time I told Terry no when he asked for help with something. It was simple, really. He needed help with the kids one weekend, and I just didn't feel like it. In the past, I would have dropped everything, no questions asked. But this time, I paused before answering. I can't this weekend, Terry. I said, I have plans. I'm sorry. There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone, but then he responded with, okay, Mom, I understand. I'll figure something out. And that was it. There were no hard feelings, no tension. I didn't feel guilty, and neither did he. It was such a small change, but it felt like a huge victory. It reminded me that setting boundaries wasn't about rejecting people. It was about protecting my own needs, too. Over time, the changes in our family dynamics became more noticeable. The way Terry and Alicia interacted with me felt different. They didn't treat me like I was fragile, and they didn't make jokes at my expense anymore. Instead, they sought my opinion, valued my advice, and treated me like an equal again. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was being seen for who I really was, not just as someone to take care of the kids or hold everything together. I was part of the family in a way that felt truly respectful. And it wasn't just about me and my immediate family. I began to see my relationships with friends and other family members shift as well. I was learning how to ask for what I needed, to express myself without fear of being dismissed. I wasn't just the supportive person anymore. I was Megan, and that felt good. But it wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old patterns crept back in. I had to remind myself that change took time. But those small steps, those small victories, added up. I didn't have to accept being treated like I was invisible anymore. In the weeks that followed, things between us settled into a new rhythm. Terry and Alicia didn't just stop making jokes. They started showing more respect in every part of their relationship with me. The little things that used to feel like they didn't matter, the casual dismissals, the funny remarks, were gone. And in their place was a new understanding. I knew this wasn't a one-and-done situation. I couldn't rest on my laurels. I had to keep asserting my boundaries, keep showing up as the person I was becoming, not the person I had been. But I was ready, and I could see that Terry and Alicia were ready too. They were making more of an effort. And it felt like we were starting to rebuild the relationship we'd once had. Only this time, there was a renewed sense of mutual respect that hadn't been there before. I had started out so uncertain, not knowing if my decision to stand up for myself would really make a difference. But now, looking at the changes, I knew that the shift was real, and it was only going to get better from here. I had taken a stand, and it wasn't just for me, it was for my family. It was for all of us. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of a new chapter in our lives. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that's happened, I feel a sense of peace that I never thought I would. It's been a journey, a difficult one, but also a transformative one. Looking back at the way things used to be, I can't help but think about how far I've come. I remember the frustration, the anger, the constant feeling that I was being treated like I didn't matter. When Terry and Alicia would joke about my hearing, I used to laugh along, thinking it was just part of being family. But deep down, it hurt. It wore me down. The longer I kept silent, the more I felt like I was losing myself. And I knew something had to change. The day I decided to speak up wasn't easy. I was scared of what it might do to my relationship with Terry, scared that speaking my truth would make everything worse. But I knew that I couldn't keep living like that, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. So, I found the courage to set a boundary. I stood up for myself, even when it felt uncomfortable, and told Terry and Alicia that their jokes weren't acceptable. At first, it felt like a huge risk, but now, I see that it was the best thing I could have done. The respect I've gotten in return from Terry and Alicia, the way they've been more thoughtful in how they treat me, it's been a relief. I didn't know how much I needed that until I started getting it. The funny thing is, it's not about the jokes anymore. It's about how we treat each other, how we make space for one another's feelings and needs. I've learned something important in this process. Standing up for yourself isn't about being harsh or demanding. It's about knowing your worth and letting others know it too. Setting boundaries isn't just for keeping people at a distance. It's for creating the space you need to feel respected. And when you do that, you not only change how others treat you, you also change how you treat yourself. I feel proud of the woman I've become in this process. I've learned that it's okay to say no. It's okay to prioritize my own well-being, even if it means upsetting the status quo. In fact, it's necessary. For the first time in a long while, I don't feel invisible anymore. I feel like I'm standing in my own power, unapologetically. But I also know this journey isn't over. There will be moments when I'll still need to remind myself that my boundaries are valid, and there may be times when I'll need to speak up again. But now, I'm ready for it. I'm ready to continue showing up for myself the way I've always shown up for others. This experience has changed me, and I know it can change others too. I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were being treated unfairly, but you didn't know how to stand up for yourself? Maybe it was with family, maybe with friends, or even at work. The truth is, we all go through moments where we're expected to just go along, to keep the peace, to smile, and let things slide. But what I've learned through all of this is that it's never too late to speak up. It's never too late to set boundaries. So, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a way that changed your family dynamic? How did it feel to finally take control of your own life? I know this isn't always easy. It can feel scary to confront the people you love, to challenge old patterns. But I hope my story helps you see that it's possible. It's possible to reclaim your voice, your dignity, and your peace of mind. If you're feeling inspired by this story, I'd love for you to share your own thoughts in the comments below. Tell me about your experiences, your struggles, and your triumphs. It's never too late to start standing up for yourself and making the changes you need in your life. And if you found this story helpful or empowering, please don't forget to like, share, and comment. I'd love to hear your feedback, and your support means the world to me. If you want to hear more stories about finding your voice, reclaiming your dignity, and learning to live life on your own terms, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more empowering stories. I'm so glad you're here, and I look forward to sharing even more with you soon. Lastly, don't forget to download this wonderful book called 38 Uplifting and Funny Short Stories for Seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's full of heartwarming, simple stories written to bring a smile, stir up memories, and remind us that joy doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like the story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on Her Kindle Stories. Remember, you are worthy of respect, and it's never too late to set boundaries.